Hello, 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 and welcome back. Today we have um, an episode that I haven't done in a long time, which is Banknotes Facts and Figures. Will be episode number 6. I think the last one was a few months ago, and today I have another one, and this will be a bit of a patriotic kind of um, explanation, a bit more history than you would imagine. Of course, as you may know, my country, I'm Portuguese. Although I have a second nationality, but I'm Portuguese, so living in the US at the moment. But I'm going to talk about something from my childhood, which is the last series before we Portugal entered the Euro, which is the last Escudos series. The Escudo was well, basically, and before we talk about history here, the Escudo was the currency unit used by Portugal right after the fall of the monarchy, which is 1910. So it was used and it was never revaluated during almost 100 years. So it was an important thing, and I was born still in that era, and most of my most of my childhood and my youth years, it was with Escudos. Only when I went to the university did we convert to euros at the time. So Escudos made part of my life, and even if I didn't collect any banknotes back then, they were part of my imaginarium. But today, before we start into this topic about the last series, a good introduction is, and again, this is a bit history, a bit patriotic thing. The last series is really about the discoveries of the world. I'm not sure that such banknotes would be made today in the sense that there is a different view of about the discoveries in the last few centuries about colonization. And this was, of course, a topic of the glories of Portugal that come really from colonization. And this is something from the 15th century, 14th, 15th century, 16th century, and not really based on the colonization of Africa in the late 19th century or forward, not slavery and all that stuff. It actually is about routes, establishing port. It's about commerce and mostly, yeah, in the end, also occupying lands. And for that, we need to go back to late um, 14th century. So basically, Portugal had conquered all it could of his territory. That part. Iberia was actually under um, the Caliphate. They were under the Islamic Caliphates of Morocco, and Portugal did conquer his share of the peninsula. And on the right side, it had Spain, and still some part, the south of Spain, was still being occupied by Arab forces or Moroccan forces. Um, I'm not going to go too much into the detail of Morocco, Moors, and all that, but basically Spain did not really exist. It was the kingdom of Castile and Leon, and only Spain only managed to actually conquer the whole Iberia or their whole Iberian part, also close to the end of the 15th century already. So Portugal was left without expansion routes internally. So by land, there was not much. We had some troubles with Spain all the time, with Castile in the borders, but there was not much there. So we didn't have any expansion. So at a certain point, we started expanding to Morocco. So just crossing the Mediterranean and going into Africa. So there was some conquest of some ports. One of them is still Spanish today, called Ceuta, and this was late 14th century. But Portugal wanted more, and the king started to see that the future would be in commerce. And for commerce, given that we were far away from the center of Europe, which was where it was being traded, we had to do something about it. And the decision here was to go into navigation, start trading with Africa, and slowly, especially beginning of the 15th century, the first islands were discovered, still some Portuguese islands that were inhabited at the time, Madeira, Azores, and then it was all the way down until, yeah, ports all over Africa, uh, Brazil, India, and more, until the point that the Spanish started doing something similar, with Christopher Columbus and other navigators, and a bit more to the east. So there was this Portuguese king and the king of Castile and Leon, at this time already king of Spain, just sat down in a border town called Tordesillas, and they basically divided the world in half. What you see here as in dark orange was everything that Portugal could get in that area would be Portuguese. The other area would be part of Spain. So basically, Spain got South America, Portugal got the rest of the world, Australia, etc. This was not known to exist at the time. It is not really relevant at this time. Of course, at this time, both Portugal and Spain were the biggest nations of Europe in terms of sea discoveries, and the last banknotes were, of course, commemorating this event, which is in fact this century is probably the one with the most glory for us, and this is really taught in school. So basically, the first banknote that we have is the 500 Escudos. This is around €2.50, and here we have someone that is not so well known. Actually, it's João Barros. He was a historian. He lived in the beginning of the 16th century, and he wrote about, yeah, he wrote basically the memories of a king, King Manuel I, which was probably one of the wealthiest kings of Europe ever. He was the one where he reigned between late 1490s to into the 16th century, and there he had really the vast expansion of the territories. A lot of spices coming from India that were brought and enriched the country. There's even some architecture tied. It's called manualism architecture, because so many beautiful buildings were built during his reign or in consequence of his reign. And this guy, João Barros, wrote his, let's say, not memoirs, but a bit of the history of his kingdomship. And this included, of course, the discoveries mostly in India and Asia. That's why you see here on the right side, you see his face of João Barros. You see here what were the Portuguese, well, it was not the whole Africa, not the whole India, but where we had some possessions. And here you can clearly see on this side an elephant. It has to do with India. And there's here this is something that was used in navigation at the time. It was invented by the Portuguese that helped navigate through the borders. I think it goes a bit into importance. The next for the 1,000 escudos is then Pedro Álvares Cabral. He's much well known than João Barros. He was the person that theoretically discovered Brazil. He discovered navigation to Brazil and then started the colonization of Brazil by the Portuguese. You can see clearly from the back of the banknote Brazilian territories. You see the monkeys and the different species that exist in Brazil that were quite different than what we had seen at the time in Europe. Here you see them arriving, and here part of the Brazilian territory that was under the crown. It was not what is Brazil today. It was mostly the coastal part. The interior was also only explored a few centuries after by both the Portuguese and the Spanish. Here what is important is, of course, Pedro Álvares Cabral. It's well known also in Brazil, of course, as the first person to arrive there from Europe. He was probably not the first one actually to arrive in these territories. This is something under discussion. There are some, let's say, secret state documents from that era that basically more or less prove that Portugal already knew that there was land there, so that's why the Treaty of Tordesillas that I explained at the beginning, the line goes a bit further to Americas, because someone knew already that there was land there, and probably he was the official discoverer, but there was someone that was there before. Next one, we come to Bartolomeu Dias. He's not so much well known as Pilgrim of the Alvares Cabral, but he did something that was extraordinary at the time. He was the first European to cross in 1488 the, the Cape of Good Hope. It's what it's called today. At the time, it was called Cape of the Torment because nobody could get around it. This is a part of South Africa that you see here in this map. Of course, this map is a bit the older maps in Europe, so it's not precise about the African coast. There's this point here where the Atlantic crosses into the Indic Ocean. Nobody had done this before, and he was the first one, together with his crew, that crossed into the Indic portion of Africa. Many had tried, but this is an area with strong winds, difficult to navigate, especially at that time. So he was important for the guy that came next, basically. He was so important that he even had two different banknotes. This is the 2000 Escudos before that, around 10 euros. This was still being used at the same time as this banknote. This is a bit older, but I think that at the time they started to create this design, but then they switched into a more modern design at the time. Yeah. So next we have someone that I think it's probably here the character that most people will know. Vasco Gama. He was the first person or he was the commander of the first naval ships that went from Europe to India. So that was in 1498, and this was especially important for Portugal because, of course, here from India, that's where all the spices came from. And in the past, they went by land through the Middle East and then into Turkey, etc. And now, basically, with this, we took a lot of time from this travel, and it made it much cheaper. And these products that were really required in Europe and really luxury items were able to be transported by the Portuguese into Europe by sea. He was so important that even in Brazil there's a club, a big club of football called Vasco da Gama, and here you see one of the boats that has the Portuguese insignia in one of the most well-known football clubs in Brazil. Here you see Vasco da Gama arriving in India, and the spices here on this side, and here, yeah, his arrival in India. It was not all fun and games, to be honest. They were not so well received initially. There is some good history books around this and some good stories, but yeah, it was an important person for Portugal, an important navigator all over the world, and probably, like I said, the most well-known person. Last but not the least, big 191, 10,000 escudos. This is the highest ever denomination that existed in Portuguese escudos. This was around 50 euros nowadays, or $60. And it has someone that it's Infante Henrique. He was the son of one of the kings of Portugal. He was not first in line to the throne, so he was never king. He knew that, and basically he became, as it's told a bit fantasized, he was the person that created a school of navigators in the south of Portugal, and he was the one that tried to make all of this happen, all these discoveries. He was the one that had the vision for it. In reality, it was not like that. This is the very romanticized version. he had some importance, but he was nevertheless basically an explorer. He made a lot of profit out of this. His intention was not really to discover new lands or to bring Christianity to this lands, and it was something that was used at the time as an excuse. It was really to pillage and to profit out of this commerce, and he had slaves and all that stuff. So it's not was not the kind person that it was basically described in history books when I was younger. He was definitely a visionary, and the when we had a dictatorship, he was like put in this big monument that you see in Lisbon, which is a very big, interesting monument. Was created for the Portuguese Expo of the World in 1940. It's still there, and he's here on top holding um, one of these Portuguese ships, and all the discoverers are behind him. And this is supposed to be one of the ships. So, of course, important. It's debatable if he ever created really a school of navigators. It's also debatable his intentions towards this and if he was really the one that was the big visionary. But nevertheless, someone that historically is important. Also, this picture here is from a painting that was, this is something curious, was basically discovered not so long ago, but maybe 80 years ago. It is one of the masterpieces of the Portuguese Renaissance, but it was basically being used in construction work at the time, just as a panel. And now it's in the Museum of Old Art, or yeah, it's Museum of Old Art, it's called, in Lisbon, and it's definitely one of the nicest paintings. It's supposed to be him, especially due to the hat. It's also not 100% sure if it's him because this is like a painting with a lot of different characters, and he's just one of them. Good. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want more like this. Of course, my knowledge of Portugal is a bit better than other countries, but happy to do so. And here I just want to say again that I don't, of course, this is history. It's not that I'm glorifying so much the discoveries and all that. We can have a discussion about it. I have my opinions. There are people that have different ones, but here what's interesting is the banknotes and how they tie to history. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.